Good morning, Year 6. Welcome back after your half term. I hope you had a very restful week and you are raring to go with our learning for this half term. So this is our Monday's reading lesson. So we are continuing on with Holes by Louis Sachar. And today we are defining vocabulary. Now, this is a skills lesson. Okay, and the reason why it's a skills lesson is because we already have the knowledge of how to do that. We have learned how to find out what part of speech a word is to see whether it is a noun or a verb to help us with working out the meaning. We know to look for antonyms and synonyms in the sentence to see if there are any clues to help us. We know to read above and below the word as well. Okay, so we are going to be applying that knowledge to work out the definition of new words in the couple of chapters that we are going to read today. But first of all, I'd like you to pause the screen and have a go at this starter. So I have said, so in the last chapter, the warden was trying to destroy all evidence that Zero, Hector Zeroni, ever existed. Stanley heard this plan. Do you think he should do something about it? And if you think he should, what should he do? So pause the screen, have a little think, write down some notes, and then we will continue. Good job. Okay, so I personally think he should do something about it. It's morally right to do something about that because what they are doing is against the law. Okay, they are trying to trick people into believing that Hector Zeroni isn't real, he isn't a person, and he's not deserving of justice. Okay, so I think he should do something about it. Now, he's in a bit of a tricky position where he might not be able to really do something about it. So he's going to have to think carefully about maybe doing something at a later date, but he should definitely work at doing something about that. So let's get started with our reading today. So this is chapter 32. 2 days later, a new kid was assigned to Group D. His name was Brian, but X-Ray called him Twitch because he was always fidgeting. Twitch was assigned Zero's bed and Zero's crate. Okay, so I don't think that Stanley would have been very happy about that. And you can see that I've highlighted assigned. That's going to be one of the words that we are going to look at later today. Okay, so they've been highlighted all the way through. Vacancies don't last long at Camp Greenlake. Twitch had been arrested for stealing a car. He claimed he could break into a car, disconnect the alarm, and hotwire the engine, all in less than a minute. I never planned to, steal one, he told them. But sometimes, I'll be walking past a real nice car, parked in a deserted area, and, I'll just start twitching. If you think I twitch now, you should see me when I'm around a car. The next thing I know, I'm behind the wheel. Stanley lay on his scratchy sheets. It occurred to him that his cot no longer smelled bad. He wondered if the smell had gone away or if he had just gotten used to it. Hey, caveman, said Twitch. Do we really have to get up at 4:30? You get used to it, Stanley told him. It's the coolest part of the day. He tried not to think about Zero. It was too late. Either he'd made it to Big Thumb, or what worried him the most, however, wasn't that it was too late. What worried him the most, what really ate at his insides, was the fear that it wasn't too late. What if Zero was still alive, desperately crawling across the dirt, searching for water? He tried to force the image out of his mind. The next morning, out on the lake, Stanley listened as Mr. Sir told Twitch the requirements for his hole. As wide and as deep as your shovel. Twitch fidgeted. His fingers drummed against the wooden shaft of his shovel, and his neck moved from side to side. You won't be twitching so much after digging all day, Mr. Sir told him. You won't have the strength to wiggle your pinky. He popped some sunflower seeds in his mouth, deftly chewed them, and spat out the shells. This isn't a Girl Scout camp. The water truck came shortly after sunrise. Stanley got in line behind Magnet, ahead of Twitch. What What if it's not too late? He watched Mr. Sir fill X-Ray's canteen. The image of Zero crawling across the hot, dry dirt remained in his head. But what could he do about it? Even if Zero was somehow alive after more than 4 days, how would Stanley ever find him? It would take days. He'd need a car. Or a pickup truck. A pickup truck with a tank of water in the back. Stanley wondered if Mr. Sir had left the keys in the ignition. He slowly backed away from the line, then circled over to the side of the truck. He looked through the window. The keys were there, dangling in the ignition. Stanley felt his fingers start to twitch. He took a deep breath to steady himself and tried to think clearly. He had never driven before. But how hard could it be? This is really crazy, he told himself. Whatever he did, he knew he'd have to do it quickly before Mr. Sir noticed. It's too late, he told himself. Zero couldn't have survived. But what if it wasn't too late? He took another deep breath. Think about this, he told himself. But there wasn't time to think. He flung open the door to the truck and climbed quickly inside. Hey! Shouted Mr. Sir. He turned the key and stepped on the gas pedal. The engine revved. The truck didn't move. He pressed the pedal to the floor. The engine roared, but the truck was motionless. Mr. Sir came running around the side of the truck. The door was still open. Put it in gear! Shouted Twitch. The gear shift was on the floor next to the seat. Stanley pulled the lever back until the arrow pointed to the letter D for drive. The truck lurched forward. Stanley jerked back against the seat and tightly gripped the wheel as the truck accelerated. His foot was pressed to the floor. The truck went faster and faster across the dry lake bed. It bounced over a pile of dirt. Suddenly, Stanley was slammed forward, then instantly backward as an airbag exploded in his face. He fell out the open door and onto the ground. He had driven straight into a hole. He lay on the dirt, staring at the truck, which stuck lopsided into the ground. He sighed. He couldn't blame his no-good, dirty, rotten, pig-stealing great-great-grandfather this time. This time it was his own fault, 100%. He had probably just done the stupidest thing he had ever done in his short and miserable life. He managed to get to his feet. He was sore, but didn't think he had broken any bones. He glanced back at Mr. Sir, who remained where he was, staring at Stanley. He ran. His canteen was strapped around his neck. It banged against his chest as he ran, and every time it hit against him, it reminded him that it was empty. 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 Chapter 33. Now, if you want to, you can pause and read this yourself and then fast forward the video, or you can carry on listening to me. He slowed to a walk. As far as he could tell, nobody was chasing him. He couldn't hear voices coming from back by the truck. He could hear voices coming from back by the truck, but he couldn't make out the words. Occasionally, he'd hear the revving of the engine, but the truck wasn't going anywhere anytime soon. He headed in what he thought was the direction of Big Thumb. He couldn't see it through the haze. Walking helped calm him down and allowed him to think clearly. He doubted he could make it to Big Thumb, and with no water in his canteen, he didn't want to risk his life on the hope that he'd find refuge there. He'd have to return to camp. He knew that, but he was in no hurry. It would be better to return later after everyone had a chance to calm down. And as long as he'd come this far, he might as well look for Zero. He decided he would walk as long as he could until he was too weak to go any further, and then he'd turn around and go back. He smiled as he realised that wouldn't quite work. He would only go halfway. Halfway as far as he thought he could go, so that he'd still have the strength to return. Then he'd have to make a deal with the warden, tell her where he found Kate Barlow's lipstick tube, and beg for mercy. He was surprised by how far out the holes extended. He couldn't even see the camp compound anymore, but he still kept passing holes. Just when he thought he'd passed the last hole, he'd come across another cluster of them, a little further away. Back at the compound, they had dug in a systematic order, row upon row, allowing space for the water truck. But out here, there was no system. It was as if every once in a while, in a fit of frustration, the warden would just pick a spot at random and say, What the hell? Dig here. It was like trying to guess the winning numbers in a lottery. Stanley found himself looking down into each hole he passed. He didn't admit to himself what he was looking for. After more than an hour had gone by, he thought he had surely seen the last hole, but then off to the left he saw another cluster of them. He didn't actually see the holes, he saw the mounds of dirt that surrounded them. He stepped over the mounds and looked into the first hole. His heart stopped. Down at the bottom was a family of yellow-spotted lizards, their large red eyes looking up at him. He leapt back over the mound and ran. He didn't know if they were chasing after him. He thought he might have seen one leap out of the hole. He ran until he couldn't run any farther, then collapsed. They hadn't come after him. He sat there a while and caught his breath. As he got back to his feet, he thought he noticed something on the ground, maybe 50 yards away. It didn't look like much, maybe just a big rock, but in a land of nothingness, any little thing seemed unusual. He walked slowly toward it. The encounter with the lizards had made him very cautious. It turned out to be an empty sack of sunflower seeds. He wondered if it was the same one Magnet had stolen from Mr. Sir, although that didn't seem likely. He turned it inside out and found one seed stuck to the burlap. Lunch. Okay, he's got to make the most out of everything, hasn't he? Over here, it said Stanley found himself looking down into each hole he passed. He didn't admit to himself what he was looking for. What do you think that means? Pause the screen and have a think. That's right. He was looking for Zero, wasn't he? He thought that Zero had got so tired that he'd collapsed in a hole. Okay, so it was kind of lucky that it was the lizards, but not lucky at the same time, because we know that one bite from a lizard makes anybody a goner. Okay, so over to your task then. So as always, we have got a list of words for you to find the definitions of, and first of all, finding the context clue. And you can do that here. This is over on Teams as an assignment. If you find that too tricky, you can do the word match here. So this is on Teams also. You just need to delete the table and then press Insert at the top tab where it's got pictures, and then you can draw lines to match them up. Okay, but let's have a look at the first one together. The word is assigned. Okay, so first of all, we are going to look back at where that is in the text. Okay, 2 days later, a new kid was assigned to Group D. His name was Brian, but X-Ray called him Twitch because he was always fidgeting. Okay, so that bit afterwards doesn't help me at all. It is just the first sentence that helps me. 2 days later, a new kid was assigned to Group D. Okay, so that's something that happened to him. So it is a verb, a doing word. Okay, so it's past tense of assign. Now, if we're not sure, there aren't really that many clues in there apart from happened to Group D. Okay, so a Group D is like a position, a place. And then I've got the word assign. So the root word assign, where have we heard that before? That's right. We've heard it in assignment, haven't we? You have your assignment today over on Teams. So we've got that it is a verb. And we know that the root word is assign. Okay. The root word is assign. Now, assign, like in assignment, that is something that we give to you, isn't it? So being assigned something means that you are given to give or to allocate to somebody a job or a role. Okay, to give a job or duty to someone. Okay, so you can do that by the definition part of it by looking in a dictionary or on an online dictionary. Okay. Now, some of you, when you have been doing this, have forgotten to do the challenge. Okay, so I want to see everybody having a go at the challenge. The challenge today is, can you use the word requirement in a sentence of your own? Okay, so that's a challenge for everybody. But if you want to go a little bit further, think about if you could add any modal verbs that might, must, should, could. Maybe you could manipulate the sentence into the passive voice by changing the subject and object around. Or could you even work in the subjunctive mood? That would be very impressive. Okay, so head on over to Teams now and have a go at that. If you haven't managed to get onto Teams, which you all should be doing by now, then I'm just going to show you the answers for the second text. There we go. Okay, good job, Year 6. And I will be back here again tomorrow with your next reading lesson. Bye for now.